we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's August 22nd here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning.
Good morning, and Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. The World Health Organization is carefully monitoring a new COVID variant called BA.286. This variant is a mutation of the Omicron variant. It has more than 30 mutations on its spike protein compared to the predominant variant, and so far we've seen this strain in Israel, Denmark, the US, and UK. While health experts are still looking into how contagious this variant is, some are saying we may have to mask up again. For the first time in 5 years, we may see coffee imports drop in Korea, where it seems normal to be drinking 2 ice Americanos per day. The Korea Customs Service found that the amount of coffee imported from January to July dropped by 3.9% on year. Experts explain that this is because the world's biggest coffee bean producers have seen a general drop due to climate change. Moving on, South Korea and the United States has kicked off their annual 4-day nationwide military drill. It's called Ulji Freedom Shield. For the first time in 6 years, civilian drills will take place on Wednesday. An anti-air raid civil defense drill will be held nationwide at 2 p.m. People will be asked to participate in civil evacuation training and follow traffic restrictions in an air raid attack scenario. Now, the main objective of these military drills is to be prepared in case North Korea takes military action. Officials said they planned this year's military drill agenda based on evolving North Korean security threats, especially against nuclear, drone, and cyber threats. And a total of 580,000 people from around 4,000 government and public organizations will be taking part. Now, if I expand the feed to the studio, does that include you guys?
Partly yes and partly no. Ever since living in Korea, I haven't been really involved in these kind of drills before, but to give you guys some information, on Wednesday, which is tomorrow at 2 p.m., the whole nation will be asked to participate, to take part in an air raid defense drill that will last for around 20 minutes. So when the siren goes off at 2 p.m., all civilians are asked to find the closest emergency evacuation shelter or anywhere underground from apartments to subways and wait for national emergency instructions through the radio. But if you're not sure where to find the closest emergency shelters, you can find out through apps like Naver Map, Kakao Navigation, and T-Map.
All right, so there's apps at handy for you to look at in order for you to know what to do during these drills. And I remember here at Arirang TV yesterday, a lot of our employees, actually everyone, was required to come 1 hour earlier. So it is the first time in 6 years that civilians will be taking part of this drill. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I'm not included in this because I am a freelancer and I'm not part of any institution or organization. And my thoughts on this is, honestly, I didn't really know about this drill because it's not something we're very familiar with. But it did remind me of the fire drills and the terror drills, and I think you mentioned earthquake drill as well, that we used to have back in school. I used to go to an international school in Thailand. So fire drills and these terror drills, because they had incidents of terror attacks, was very important, and it was mandatory for all teachers and students to take part in. But with this drill that's going to take place tomorrow, it's going to be targeting the institutions and not so much, I don't think the individuals like me will take part in it because they don't have like the specific guidelines given through institutions and organizations.
But it's worth mentioning that you were in Thailand, I was in California when I was young, and I think the drills at the time revolve around the most imminent threats.
Exactly.
For me in California, it was earthquake drills, but for you in Thailand, as you mentioned, it was terror drills and stuff like that. And here in Korea, the civil drills are worth noting because our threat at the moment, as long as it's been, has been North Korea. And they're evolving. The threats we're seeing is not only nuclear related, but we're seeing cyber attacks. So we'll have to see how this annual drill goes on from this day on forward. And that was our news feed for this Tuesday. Let's now head into our discussion topic of the day. A key trait often associated with our generation is that we're choosing to get married later than our parents, or even not get married at all. And officials have constantly been trying to reverse this trend. That's why they'll be introducing a groundbreaking measure from next year. Take a look at the screen to find out what this is. Korea's population is dwindling. That's why officials are urgently trying to boost birth rates. How? By first encouraging young people to get married. That's why last month, the Ministry of Economy and Finance decided to ease gift taxes on newlyweds. They raised the amount parents can give their children tax-free for their wedding and married life. Originally, tax exemptions were only available for gift amounts up to $37,000. The new government has doubled the tax-free limit to around $77,000. Will this latest government policy encourage more young people to get married, though? Let's find out by asking our millennial panelists in the studio, starting with Chihi.
Well, this latest measure, unfortunately, isn't really a fundamental resolution to the issue we're facing of where young people, they're unable to get married or choosing not to get married.
Right.
And as the cost of living, especially housing, has been skyrocketing recently, it's hard to get married just because you can't afford the housing and you really need that financial support from your parents or family. However, not every parent are able to afford that financial support for their children, which is why we think, or many think, that this new policy will only benefit those who had that money to get married in the beginning. And so the policy may relieve some burden from those who have that money to give to their children, because of course they'll be exempt from that tax. But then it won't really help encourage others who didn't really have that plan to get married in the first place.
Right. And Kyun, I remember talking about this policy with you here in the studio. I think it was on our news feed. Can you elaborate on what you still think about this policy?
Just thinking back, I wasn't happy talking about it back then. I'm still not happy because, like I mentioned before, this policy only seems to apply to the upper class. So they're the ones who are really benefiting, not the vast majority, including myself. I wonder, how many people have parents who can give 300 million won, or approximately 200,000 US dollars, just as gift money. So anyway, I can see where the government is trying to go with these kind of policies, especially the one that's coming out next year. But I think to encourage more the vast majority of young generation to get married is to really make housing more affordable. And especially in the metropolitan area, and that's where the high density of population is, especially with young generation as well,
and workplaces too.
Exactly. And I think also the government is trying by offering rental housing for newlyweds, which is a great system. However, you have to meet all the conditions that's laid out, and it is chosen through a lucky draw as well. So you obviously need luck on top of meeting all the conditions to actually be eligible to live in one of these houses supported by the government. So I think it's a huge hurdle for young people to just get married and to move on from there. It's just work after work, and
it's
a lot of things to worry about.
And money after money.
Exactly.
You need a lot of money, as you mentioned, housing. But there's so many things that you need to think about before getting married in Korea. So let's find out, on average, how much do we need to decide to get married here in Korea?
Well, so in the country, it's not so much the wedding that's costly. It's the whole budget that you need to really think of getting married, because the preparation for the housing, I told you earlier, is what takes up the biggest part of that budget. And if you take a look on the screen, this is a bar graph showing the average cost needed for couples to get married here in the country. So as you see, around 90% of the money goes to looking for a home. And here it doesn't necessarily mean buying a home, but seeking at least a jeonse, and we've talked about this in one of our previous episodes. It's where you pay a lump sum of deposit money to live under a contract for at least 2 years. And the list includes the cost of the other preparations needed to get married, other than that wedding hall and the wedding gifts money, as well as the honeymoon cost. And what's notable here is that compared to 2020, that's 3 years ago, the average budget required to get married jumped by over twofold.
Wow.
And this, of course, also is largely due to the surge in housing prices over the past 3 years. So as you've seen, the exceptionally high living costs, especially the housing, is the biggest hurdle or the reason why young people in Korea can't afford to get married. And like Ki-hoon mentioned earlier, it seems that those who get married at a relatively younger age are able to receive the help from their family or parents in the first place. And of course, there are some who do get married by just saving up on their own, really. But these people are really rare, and they're
Such a minority.
It's a very minority, and I mean, they're really capable if they're able to do so.
I mean, I really respect them, and I wish to
Exactly.
be like
Yeah,
that
me
because it's
too.
just close to impossible
too.
for you to get married without asking for help from your parents or finding ways to get loans and stuff like
Yeah.
that because it's so costly. But would you like to add on, Kyun, to explain how costly it is to get married here in Korea?
Right, I did my own little survey,
Okay.
and I asked 3 of my friends, all 3 of them who are married, and I found out that 2 of them already had their housing issues solved before marriage.
Lucky them.
Yeah,
How?
so one of them got the house from their grandparents, the other one, the wife's parents. Yes, had it all solved out. So they said, all 3 of them said housing was the biggest burden
Yeah.
for them, like during the marriage process. But the list goes on, preparing for the wedding, buying the furniture, honeymoon. You have to please the wife, okay? Because happy wife means happy life.
Exactly.
Anyway, but to be honest, like just these numbers, like the 2 of my friends, they spent around 100 million won. Approximately 75,000 US dollars
Wow.
just for the wedding and furniture and honeymoon combined. So I think like this number is kind of overwhelming just for me, and
Yeah.
especially for people in their late 20s and early 30s. But moving aside from the housing, because I'm getting sick of talking about housing because it's impossible for me. But raising a child in Korea, like especially here in Seoul, it is super expensive with all the education and the tuition fee that's involved in private tuition. And I'm sure we've talked about this as well, like the private tuition fees. And raising a child doesn't just include education. But here in Korea, it's all about education. And think about it, for 20 years until they grow up and become independent, where they can actually support the parents.
Yeah.
20 years, can you imagine
You
just
have to keep pouring money into
pouring
it.
money into your kids? I mean, it's obvious for a parent to do
Yeah.
that, but it's also quite burdensome.
It's burdensome, and I think because we're living in such a homogenous country, you keep comparing how much you can invest in your child or to your wife or husband because you see, oh, I hear that our neighbor did this for their child, and especially the reason why a lot of people are concentrated in the greater metropolitan region is because there's rumors and I think some database that education here is better. Well, people think that way. That's why they want to provide the best education, the best conditions for their family.
Exactly.
Which is why we're seeing this sort of vicious cycle of people pouring in a lot of money, not only for their weddings and like their marriage life, but also for their children. But to better find out how much money we actually need and whether millennials and Gen Z here in the studio think that money is an important factor to get married, let's do a short OX game. So I'm going to ask our panelists to hold up their OXs
All right.
based on different scenarios that I have for you. And the first scenario is, let's say you've met the love of your life. You really love this person, but you don't have anything saved up. So both of you don't have anything saved up to get married. Would you still pull through? So Chihi, what about
I'd say yes.
Okay, what about you?
I
Kyun?
say no.
Okay.
That's a big no. Big no.
It's gonna be a fun debate. Let's hear from Chihi first.
Because if you've met the love of your life,
Yeah.
that's a very important precondition. I mean, money. You can have money, and there could be times where you lose money.
Yeah.
It's not like a permanent kind of asset that you have in your hand. So if you've met that person and you feel like you can go through any hurdles with that person throughout your life,
Yeah.
I feel like you don't have to have a wedding hall. Like you can just
Aw.
live in a monthly rent. I mean, I could sound like a romanticist or an idealist.
That's really nice though. Money comes and goes, but the love of your life stays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
really
what I believe.
People come and go as well. Yeah, not just money.
Okay, then all right. So tell us why you chose to hold up an X.
Look, if I did meet the love of my life,
Yeah.
I'll be super happy, over the moon. But if that person is in the same financial situation as me, I mean, going through hard times, I don't want to give her the extra burden of, just suffering together. Like, I don't think that means love. Love just means, for me, it's like supporting that person, whether it's financially, emotionally. But I think I said this before, money is not everything.
Yeah.
But it is something.
It is.
And it is a big factor
Yeah.
in life, especially when you live together as well. Like if I live by myself in a poor condition, that's fine. It's just my life, it's my choice. But to bring that upon on another person's life is, I think, not the right thing to do.
It's going to be burdensome too, because you're
Right.
responsible not only for yourself,
Exactly.
but for your partner. Now let's move on to the second scenario. Would you be able to ask for your parents' help in terms of finance, of course, to get married? What would you say to that, Ji?
I'd say no.
no. What about you?
No.
Okay, you guys are agreeing for the first time. Let's hear from
In
you,
a different
Ji.
way.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I'm
Why?
sure in
How?
a different way. Because our parents have helped us enough, and getting married is your choice. It's not a necessity these days, and you can't. I don't feel like you have to. It's like you don't have money that you have saved up, like in your parents' bank, that you have to take back. You know,
Yeah.
it's not like a. It's not your what do you say, like right to take that
Right.
money from your parents. So I don't think if you want to get married, you have to get married
your
on your.
choice.
It's your choice, and you have to be financially able to do so. If you can't, and if you choose not to, then just wait until you save up.
So you're
That's
saying,
an option.
Yeah, if you made that choice, you should own up to it,
Yes.
not your parents. All right. What about you, Ki-hoon?
I'm a no because I've already asked my parents and they said no. They said no. They cannot help me. They don't have that financial ability to
Yeah.
even support me through my marriage. So I already know that I'm not going to receive any help.
It's not
from
a
my
choice
parents.
then. It's already a conclusion.
It's a
for you.
conclusion.
Yeah.
So I've set my mind. If I do get married, I need to have that kind of financial stability.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
good.
think it's my mindset's a little different to other people.
But this leads me to the last question I have for this part of our discussion. A lot of people from our generation, especially those that are in their late 20s or early 30s, seem to only get married once they have that financial help from their parents, don't you think?
That's right. Well, these days they really do need those money from their parents. As Ki-hoon said, his friends already had the housing prepared from their family, from their grandparents.
Right.
But I feel like this is why people who can't afford that help from their family or parents turn to the subscription system that we have here in the country.
Right.
Because if you have the luck and if you have the information, you have the chance of getting a house even though you're very young and you can't receive the financial support from your parents.
I see. Now, we asked our viewers what they think about the topic of the day as well. So if you take a look at the screen, you can see how they or the people around them saved up to get married. Take a look at what 3 of them had to say. You Can Change Elias says, weddings are no longer worth the investment when you often end up in divorce. It's better to save for the money for the 10-year anniversary than actually you're sure that you're celebrating a success. Shar said, weddings, although still popular in the West, are seen as an outdated religious ceremony. Mim said, I feel like people around me do no planning or financial preparation whatever for marriage. A family member of mine asked on Facebook for someone to DJ his wedding free of charge for the upcoming weekend. And once again, thank you to our viewers who decided to add a comment on today's discussion topic. But now let's include a family attorney in our talks to find out just how important saving up money is to get married. We'll include her in our talks right after this. To find out how important money is for getting married here in Korea, we're going to hear from a family attorney. It's Chun Sumi, who has dealt with many divorce cases and talked to many married couples. Welcome, Sumi.
Hi, hello, good morning.
Yeah,
Today's
nice to have
topic
you
is
here
so
again.
Interesting.
All right. And Sumi, to extend this interesting topic of the day, I'd like to ask you the first question. As I mentioned before, you've met many married couples, and were there some who filed for divorce or were going through a hard time because they didn't have enough saved up before or after their wedding?
Yeah, there are many couples getting divorced these days. There are many reasons for their divorce, of which economic difficulties are representative. Divorce is not only for one reason, the financial difficulties, but it becomes financially difficult. There are many fights between couples, relationship worsen, and consequently divorce. I think that this is not just a problem for millennials and the Generation Z, but it is the phenomenon that occurs throughout the entire generation. But the younger generation may suffer more financially because they have, as you know, they have just a short career. So it could be bring out that they have a relatively low income and less time to make a property, I think.
I I see. Well, so Sumi, do you think millennials and Gen Z go through a harder time saving up to get married compared to the previous generation? And what costs the most and why is it so difficult?
Maybe I think that the biggest reason is the increase in housing cost, including housing purchase cost, as you mentioned before. So compared to previous generation, nowadays it costs much more money to buy a house. It's too expensive, as you know, and which means that it has become more difficult for a new couple to buy a house, which makes them hesitate to marry itself. The causes are various, such as global inflation and higher labor and material cost and concentration in the Seoul metropolitan area, and are not easily served. Under the current circumstance, the regular way for newlyweds to reduce disputes over the financial issues is to draw up a specific financial roadmap before marriage, draw up and notarize a premarital contract between couples to acquire and own property after marriage, the registration, I think.
Okay, so as a family attorney, can you give us just one tip, one short tip on how to prevent filing for divorce or having a legal dispute over money-related issues, especially for people who are planning on getting married or who have already gotten married recently?
It's a top secret. I
Top
say
secret.
to you, just for you. So,
Thank you.
as I mentioned earlier, a good way for newlywed to prevent a legal dispute over money is to draw up and notarize the prenuptial agreement between couple. In addition, it is necessary to have a principle that the property owned before marriage is exclusive ownership. Maybe, for example, the money donated by parents, as you know, and after marriage, the property formed by the couple's joint effort is joint ownership. If you decide to divorce because it is difficult to continue your relationship as a couple, it is important to secure your contribution to the couple's common property through consultation with a lawyer.
I see. All right. Thank you so much, Sumi. We'll take that secret policy in mind and put it in our minds before we ever decide to get married. Thank you so much. All right, and the government policy we talked about today was easing tax exemptions for parents trying to help out their children getting married. But aside from finance-related policies, what do you guys think at the studio should be encouraged for more young people to get married? Starting with you, Kyun.
For me, I think the younger generation needs to grow up learning and being educated from their own parents that, getting married and having your own kids is a great part of life. It's a huge achievement and something that every human being should do.
For sure. We need to grow up. I think that's the quote of the day. What about you, Jihi?
Well, you mentioned societal atmosphere.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important part, really. I mean, and this requires efforts at all levels, like individual, institutional, and governmental. So it's going to take a long time, but we should really create that atmosphere where marriage and getting married isn't really about the budget, and it's not like a start of a whole new world, which is going to be very strenuous and hard for both of you, but it's really a happy thing, and that will encourage more young people to get married.
Of course, I think social atmosphere comes hand in hand with the perception of marriage and how we should be preparing for it, and hopefully we'll be seeing more policies come through that, through discussions like today.
And one day we'll all get married.
And one day we'll all get married.
In 10 years' time.
We'll have to see what happens.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Ji-hee,
Thank you.
and Park Ki-hoon.
Always a pleasure.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.